In 2004, Desperate Housewives was being watched by over 30 million people every Sunday night. During its very first season, the cast scooped up awards, was on every magazine cover, being parodied on SNL and late night, and the show's ads and billboards were everywhere. It seemed like everyone around the world was watching Desperate Housewives. But there was one more thing that made the Desperate Housewives cast even more famous, and that was their problems behind the scenes. Lots of shows manage to keep their cast problems buried, at least while the show is airing. But during its peak of season 1, the Desperate Housewives cast had an explosive shoot with Vanity Fair that was so outrageous, the magazine actually called them out in the accompanying article. From that point on, people became just as interested in the behind-the-scenes drama as they were in the show itself. The behind-the-scenes antics became so well known that it wasn't just being poked fun at by SNL, late-night hosts, and award shows, but even by the stars of the show itself. However, it wasn't just the cast that was putting a strain on the production, as there were many allegations surrounding the showrunner Marc Cherry and how he conducted himself on set, how he treated his writers, and how he treated his cast. Tensions continued to rise, and following the show's 5th season, with still millions and millions of people watching, one of the lead actresses of the show filed a lawsuit against the creator and the show itself. So that's what we're going to be discussing today: the drama, controversies, lawsuits, and allegations surrounding Desperate Housewives and everything they tried to keep buried over the show's run. We'll also discuss each of the individual cast members' controversies over the years and after the show, as things certainly didn't slow down in the drama department for the Desperate Housewives cast, with even one of the housewives taking a storyline from the show a little too seriously and winding up in a media firestorm that resulted in her in handcuffs and behind bars. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack, and let's dive in to the secret, tense, drama-filled, and desperate lives of the Desperate Housewives cast. The American Broadcasting Company, also known as ABC, is an American commercial broadcast television network that serves as the flagship property of Disney Entertainment, which of course is a division of the Mighty Mouse and his empire, the Walt Disney Company. ABC is one of what's known as the Big Three when it comes to US television networks, with the other two being NBC and CBS. If I asked you to comment your favorite ABC show down below, there'd be a lot of answers. But if you asked anyone about ABC television shows during the 2004 and 2005 television season, which runs from September 2004 to May 2005, you'd only hear about ABC's new Big Three, which were the 3 television shows that all unbelievably launched during this television season: Lost, Grey's Anatomy, and Desperate Housewives. These 3 TV shows changed television forever, but during the pilot season, everybody wasn't convinced they were going to be worth all of the money that was being put into bringing all 3 of these shows to ABC. The ABC executive who greenlit the Lost pilot, which was well over $1 million, was actually fired over it, but he was hired back after the show went on to be insanely successful. Lost was one of the most talked about shows for years and is frequently lauded today as a brilliant show, even if people hated the ending. Grey's Anatomy, where do I begin? Watching Grey's Anatomy is the most consistent thing in my life. Watching it from when I was a junior in high school all the way up until now when I've just returned from a Botox appointment, so there's been quite the passage of time. Grey's Anatomy is still on our screens today and has been renewed for a 21st season. It's one of the most successful shows of all time. But despite Lost and Grey's Anatomy's success, they had nothing on the absolute monster that was Desperate Housewives. Desperate Housewives was by far the most successful show on ABC, not only for the 2004-2005 TV season, but throughout the whole golden age of ABC during the 2000s. And don't worry, we will be getting into Lost and Grey's Anatomy in just a few weeks, as I'll be doing behind the scenes videos on both of those shows, because all three of these shows, yes, were enormously successful, but all three of them had unbelievable issues behind the scenes. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll dive much more into Grey's Anatomy and Lost to complete this trilogy of ABC's 2000s TV. Desperate Housewives was a show that ran for 8 seasons from 2004 to 2012. Each season consisted of 23 or 24 episodes, with the exception of season 4, which only had 17 episodes due to being impacted by the 2007 writers' strike. The show was the creation of Marc Cherry, who came up with the idea after a discussion with his mother, who he described as the quintessential housewife. Cherry was watching the news with his mother in the early 2000s when a news report came on about the infamous case of Andrea Yates, who took the life of all 5 of her children by drowning them. Cherry said to his mother he couldn't imagine what would ever drive a mother to do that, and Cherry's mother responded, "I've been there." Cherry said that really shocked him because he always thought of his mother as the perfect housewife and mother, who that is all she ever wanted to be. So Cherry thought, wow, if my mother, who wanted to be nothing else but a housewife and mother and seems so perfect at it, if she feels that way, how do some other women feel? Cherry created the show with each of the original cast members all being housewives that are desperate in their own way. Cherry actually based 2 of the leads on his mother, with the character of Lynette Scavo, played by Felicity Huffman, representing Cherry's mother when he himself was a child and his mother was overwhelmed with her young children. The other character that is based on Cherry's mother is the most detailed and richest character in the show, Brie Vanderkamp, played by Marsha Cross. She represents Cherry's mother from his teens into his adulthood and up until present day, as on the surface, Brie is the picture-perfect housewife, although, as with everything in Desperate Housewives, nothing is quite as it seems. And the phrase, "not what it seems," can even be applied to the show itself, as in the production, because the show on the surface, with the magazine covers and interviews and awards and red carpet moments, it all looks perfect. But when you look below the surface, there is an absolute clusterfuck of behind the scenes drama, antics, cast feuds, fighting, lawsuits, and even behavior that resulted in Vanity Fair calling out the cast on the cover of their magazine because of what happened at one of the cover shoots, with the cast fighting on the set of the photo shoot. The rest of the main cast is made up of Eva Longoria, playing the character of Gabrielle Solis, a former model in her mid-20s who's married to a wealthy, slightly older husband and who's having an affair with a high school gardener, John, played by Jesse Metcalfe. That storyline is the first of quite a few that are problematic, especially when looking back from 2025. The 4th lead cast member is Terry Hatcher, playing the character of Susan Meyer, a children's book illustrator who is divorced and has parentified her daughter, Julie. Rounding out the cast are Brenda Strong as Mary Alice Young, who in the opening sequence of the show takes her own life, and then the first season of the show is solving the mystery of why. Brenda Strong also narrates the entirety of the series, with less than a handful of episodes episodes being narrated by other characters. The narration is done in a very similar style as to that of Meredith Grey in Grey's Anatomy, with usually the narration only taking place in the opening and the closing scenes, and the voiceover kind of tying into the episode's larger storyline. And also rounding out the rest of the cast is Nicolette Sheridan as Edie Britt, James Denton as Mike Delfino, Ricardo Shavira as Carlos Solis, Doug Savant as Tom Scavo, and Stephen Culp as Rex Vanderkam. So we're first going to go over the background of the series, get the lay of the land, make sure you have all the information you need, and then we'll be diving into each of the actors' individual dramas and mainly the larger issues behind the scenes, which are plentiful for sure. As I mentioned, Lost and Grey's Anatomy had absolutely nothing on Desperate Housewives when it came to numbers, and honestly, many other things, and it wasn't even close. Desperate Housewives annihilated Lost and Grey's and pretty much all other shows in the ratings and had millions and millions more watching every week. The premiere of Desperate Housewives was a huge success right out of the gate, and they had almost 22 million people tuning in to the premiere, with the first season's overall average of 24 million. With the success of the show and it being talked about everywhere, anyone around this time period, especially TV buffs like me, will all remember the white commercials with all of the cast holding red apples and nearly all of the promo materials being this white background with black text and hints of bright reds. And this just really stood out. And I mean, their ads were everywhere. It was very simple but effective, and the first season's ratings continued to climb, with just shy of 31 million people watching the season 1 finale, which are insane numbers then, but those are numbers we will never ever see again on television. I cannot oversell how huge this show was and how talked about it was too. It was everywhere. But it wasn't just ratings and buzz and people talking. Desperate Housewives was one of the first shows to be huge on social media as social media platforms emerged throughout the 2000s. And just like in the ratings, Desperate Housewives also dominated when it came to award seasons. Desperate Housewives has won scores and scores of awards. We're going to jump into everything behind the scenes, but it is important to set the stage about how successful this show was, because it really does impact a lot of the issues that happened on set and between cast and a lot of the show's creator and writers and things, because the show out of the gate, first season, dominated so huge in the ratings. It was scooping up awards everywhere, but it also had this buzz and discussion that just doesn't exist anymore with television, especially network TV, because you just don't have TV shows like Desperate Housewives and Lost and Grey's Anatomy. I mean, Grey's Anatomy still exists, but it's not the same. That these shows, it was appointment viewing. Everybody, and obviously I'm being hyperbolic, everybody would sit down to watch these shows week after week. You went into work and talked about them, or school, or just hanging out with your friends. There was discussions online, and it was this sort of experience that everybody went through that watched the show, because you couldn't just binge watch and you couldn't go back and catch it on. I mean, TiVo was emerging and things like that, but everybody didn't have it, and it was a new thing, really new then. And so you really did sit down and watch it, and you didn't have second screen now that shows are made with having it in mind that people are sitting scrolling. Like Desperate Housewives, Lost, these shows, they built on the stories week after week. And so there was this element of mystery and what's happening. And Desperate Housewives' first season, it all builds into something. And so that also was prompting all these conversations. And so these people that were on these shows became overnight like massive stars. Eva Longoria, yes, she'd done a lot of soap work before, but it just was another level. And even people like Terry Hatcher, who had done Superman and Lois and a lot of other shows, and Felicity Huffman and Marsha Cross had done a lot of stuff too, but this just was something else. And so that happening, I talk about this a lot in my videos, this kind of overnight success that turns these people into absolute megastar, where your picture is everywhere and you're on interviews and magazine covers. It can turn people into monsters, although a lot of people who work behind the scenes in the industry say that it doesn't turn people into monsters. It lets people reveal themselves as monsters. And with these shows, especially when they have ensemble casts, there's also these comparisons between the actors, which is always heightened when the 5 main leads are all women. It was also the early 2000s, which the early 2000s media was not known for being great. And it was also the dawn of people like Perez Hilton, who really fanned the flames of a lot of these behind the scenes issues. So now let's jump into exactly what was happening on the set of Desperate Housewives and see why, in fact, this show is known as one of the most infamous and toxic sets of the 2000s, with many of the cast feuds still existing today over 20 years later.
At Desperate Housewives, we are an ensemble, a team, and a family. God, you guys can really act.
So now we have an understanding of how big and how popular this show was and how the cast became global superstars overnight. We can dive into the first massive big thing that happened that made the public very aware of the behind the scenes issues. As I mentioned, this was all happening in 2004, 2005. Facebook had literally just been founded and it wasn't even like it is today. You couldn't even use it unless you had a university email, and at that time it was only a select few universities too. So with no social media and just very basic websites and interviews, magazines and forums, you couldn't really follow stuff in the same way with TV shows and behind the scenes and actors. Things were a lot more sterilized, and actors, their PR and managers and everyone else only shared what they wanted to share. Of course, people in the industry still talked, and when there are all these massive egos and issues, things do always leak out, especially with TV, as a lot of these shows are filmed on lots with tons of other productions and thousands of people all working around them. With the show being so huge, there was a lot of publicity and interviews, and many people from both the show and ABC have spoken about how one of the things that was frequently argued about amongst the cast was who was in the middle of publicity pictures, as generally, if you think of a lot of ensemble TV shows, the star or the lead is in the middle, like Buffy and Charmed. They used to put the bigger star in the middle for newer shows too, the person with the most name recognition. This show was built on the point that it was truly an ensemble cast and they were all supposed to be even, although Terry Hatcher was positioned to be the lead in certain publicity things that they did, and she was also put forward for a lot more awards, for example, than a lot of the other cast. Additionally, throughout the first season, there was this kind of boiling pot about Terry Hatcher because not only was she being positioned as the lead of the show, but she was being paid more than everyone else, because when she came in, she was an established name from when she was on Lois and Clark. And even though that was in the mid-90s, it was the biggest project that any of the cast had really done and the biggest thing that most of the public would be aware of. So all of these things meant a lot of tension building up throughout the first season, and it very much came to a head at the Vanity Fair cover shoot that they did for the cover story and interview for the May 2005 issue.
It makes it look like there's all this catfighting and stuff that is going on. How do you respond?
I'm happy with what it says about me. I mean, it's Vanity Fair. They're not going to print something they can't print.
So read between the lines.
The photo shoot and the interviews took place right at the end of filming for season 1, so the show was already very successful. This shoot also became infamous for what happened, as it was the last group photo shoot the cast of Desperate Housewives ever did together. Vanity Fair's intro to the photo shoot and interview, like the actual text that they write on the article and interview, it actually calls them out straight away, because the text said, "The plan, a lighthearted photo shoot with the cast of America's Sunday night sensation. The result, a 5-star drama complete with profanity, tears, and tantrums, exploring the Desperate Housewives dynamic." This photo shoot also took place after they had won the Golden Globe for Best Series, and when Terry Hatcher had won her Golden Globe for the first season. So she, as I said, was always put forward for a lot more awards. So I'm sure the fact that she won added even more attention to what was going on between the cast. Additionally, Terry allegedly did not treat the rest of the cast or crew very well at all, although there are 1 or 2 cast members who've spoken about her being nice to them, and a lot of the rest of the cast have spoken about a big star who was a bully over the years on the set. And most people believe that this is Terry Hatcher, although I will say that no one has actually said it was Terry. Later on, we will talk a lot about the reasonings and kind of puzzle pieces that people have put together and why they think it is Terry that the cast is talking about when they talk about a bully. And I will talk about my own experience with an ensemble cast made up of all women, the L Word, to go back to YouTube roots again for me. But there was a lot of, I don't want to say drama, there was some drama on that show and Generation Q, the new version or reboot, whatever you want to call it. But there also is a lot of actors that don't line up with what they say publicly or what the audience thinks they're like in reality, compared to how they actually behave when they're not in front of a camera or in an interview, or, you know, even something like doing an appearance or something like that, where they know that it's all curated and staged and people are recording them. So I will talk about that a little bit later in the video. So the cast are set to arrive at the Vanity Fair shoot, and Vanity Fair is sent this long list of mandatory stipulations, like all the women had to have their own glam team, which is pretty normal for Hollywood anyway. But then there were stipulations that weren't so common, like do not let Terry Hatcher be in the middle of the group shot, and do not let Terry Hatcher have first look at the wardrobe.
Why would they say we don't want her in the center of the picture?
These are deeper questions than I can answer. I'm sure you can figure it out.
Vanity Fair was also told absolutely no bathing suits, and I will put a picture of the cover on the screen so you can see how well that was adhered to. Vanity Fair also had to deal with a lot of people that ABC sent over, mainly publicists from ABC, from Touchstone, personal publicists, their assistants, and more. And these shoots already have a crazy amount of people. There's PAs and assistants and all 5 glam teams that make up stylists, hair people, makeup people, wardrobe people, and all of the cast will have had personal assistants and managers. And, you know, sometimes a big thing like this, there'll be other people around. So there is just a huge amount of people. And of course, for each of the actresses, each one of their team members, like publicists and all those people, they're kind of vying for getting the most attention or whatever it is for their client. Usually a cover shoot like this, it take place over about 2 days, but they were trying to fit this all into one day because of how busy the cast was. They did the interview portion before, and they did it on the sets in each of the cast members' trailers individually. And when you read the interviews now, which is the first part of the article, which of course will always be linked with everything I've used to make this video in the sources, that is looking a little bit different now, especially because we have all of the context. We know there was a lot of issues behind the scenes, and because of what happened at this shoot, the interview definitely does read a lot differently, and you can kind of read between the lines of what a lot of the women say. For example, Terry Hatcher said in the interview that I've never been anything but grateful for this role and show, but I'm not sure about the others. I mean, things like that, they just don't sound great. Even before the cast came to the shoot, series creator Marc Cherry was extremely worried about the 5 women being there together for a photo shoot and was quoted as saying, "I hope everything works out with this. The Vanity Fair photo shoot this weekend, I think it's a problem on our end. Coordinating all of this, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine." And that's when you'd cut to the narrator saying, "It was not fine." Eva Longoria actually showed up 2 hours early due to a mix-up with the times with her publicist, and she went to have a nap in her trailer. And before she woke up, Terry Hatcher arrived and went to wardrobe. There was someone else on the set that Vanity Fair refers to as ABC's enabler, and that's what they call him throughout the article. And when this enabler learned that Terry was on the way to wardrobe, he told Vanity Fair staff that they needed to stop her, and he got really angry when he found out that Terry Hatcher had also coordinated with the stylist a few days before the shoot, which is pretty normal for this type of thing. And usually on shoots like this, it normally is a first come, first serve basis when it comes to wardrobe. When the other women arrived, everything was fine. They all picked out bathing suits except for Felicity Huffman. And obviously no one was going to say anything because no one's going to speak to talent that way. They went to the pool, all of the cast, to take the picture. And even though the enabler was shouting at Vanity Fair's staff for violating the no bathing suit policy, the women all kind of just took up spots around the pool. There was 2 chairs and a lounger, and Felicity Huffman was on one chair, Nicolette Sheridan was on another, Eva Longoria was on the lounger, and then Marsha Cross was kind of standing here, and Terry Hatcher was in the middle. And when Marsha Cross saw that Terry Hatcher was beside her and in the middle, she grabbed her robe and stormed off the set. When Marsha Cross stormed off set, she screamed the enabler's name and then screamed, "Get your fucking ass over here now and do your fucking job." This set, because it was, well, this shoot, because it was ongoing, like they were actually taking the pictures, usually this sort of thing, they'll make it a closed set, which means even people like a lot of the publicists will be back behind like the line, and it's very common that they do this sort of thing. Otherwise there's just like so many people there. And so Vanity Fair told the enabler, "You're not allowed on set," and Marsha Cross shouted back, "I don't care, it's a fucking closed set or not, get him over here now." The enabler came running over around the corner from where he was and said about the photographer, "I don't care what the photographer says, whatever the talent wants is what goes." The photographer suggested that Marsha Cross and Nicolette Sheridan switch positions, and Cross said, "No, I don't want to sit in a chair." So Hatcher agreed to take the chair, and that put Nicolette Sheridan in the middle, which is the picture that we ended up seeing on the cover. Hatcher then walked to the other end of the pool after they'd taken the pictures, and she got on her phone call and had a very heated and tearful conversation, according to Vanity Fair. Most of the rest of the shoot that were all the single shots of like the individual housewives went fine, except for Marsha Cross's, as her shoot had her like clipping a hedge with garden shears, and there was a man with a appendage showing, and she said she wasn't going to come on set until it was removed. She was also wearing a purple dress for the shoot, and instead of having a petticoat, she had put on like a garter with a belt, and they were using like a fan to blow up her skirt, which is like super common on shoots too. And Vanity Fair was saying in the article that the fan was blowing the dress high but not too high. But Apparently, the vice president of ABC Publicity was not happy with this and was saying that Cross's panties were being exposed. So he came over and was shouting, "Stop taking that picture." Vanity Fair said that Marsha Cross just kind of stood there and was poker faced, and the vice president started shouting, "I'm not leaving. You're going to have to pull me off this set. You can see her underwear." Things continued to deteriorate throughout the day, so much that Kevin Brockman, who was the head of ABC Publicity, was called away from his weekend, just doing whatever, to come to the set and calm things down. And the shoot ended up wrapping 3 hours after it was supposed to at 7 p.m. Vanity Fair tried to tell the enabler, "Oh, at least we got some great shots." And they received the reply, "That's what you think. My actors were so fucking miserable all day." So if this was what was going on the set of a photo shoot that lasted one day, that they couldn't even hold it together for, can you imagine what was going on behind the scenes and behind closed doors? But honestly, not one thing in this article shocks me. It sounds like a lot of sets, to be honest. I will say that I'm sure they were under enormous pressure and being picked apart in the media at that time. And although Vanity Fair says things like, "Oh, the fan was blowing the skirt high, but not too high," I've seen magazines and photographers and many other people do pretty outrageous things to get a certain shot or soundbite, and I'm sure we can all think of examples. In my opinion, there's no reason that you should be ever speaking to someone like this. We've all had a moment where we've lost our temper or something has just set us off that really shouldn't, but it's a lot of things all together. And as I said, I'm sure they were under a lot of pressure and they had so many people with eyes on them. Even in the Vanity Fair article, they all nearly speak a lot about how they're expecting this backlash because they know, they love to build people up and tear them down. And I wonder if they'd really started to see people getting fed up that way. And I'm sure there were as many people that were cheering them on and watching the show. I'm sure they had a lot of detractors too, because even though it's usually only a small amount of people that are haters or whatever you want to say with these TV shows, when it's 31 million people, even if it's 1%, that's still a huge amount of people. But also on the other side of the coin, you think these people had everything they ever wanted. They were huge stars on one of the most successful shows in the world, and they just won the Golden Globe for Best Series. They were about to renegotiate their contracts for season 2, and they were going from 60 to 80K an episode, depending on who it was, and they were looking at renegotiating for $200,000 to $250,000 an episode in 2004. And remember, these shows have 23 to 24 episodes a season. We're talking millions and millions of dollars, and you'd think they could hold it together for one day for one photo shoot.
That'll be our job, is to come forward from this and figure out how to repair damage.
And it's honestly not just the money and success that feeds the egos of these celebrities, because all of these publicists and managers and just everyone else on these sets that enables and promotes a lot of this behavior, because talent is always treated as though they are above everyone else. Most sets, you aren't even allowed to speak to the talent unless you're pretty high up in the whole structural hierarchy. The best way I ever saw this kind of summed up about what happens to people when they become wildly successful in Hollywood, and you can apply this to a lot of those huge social media influencer people too. It was actually in Tina Fey's book when she was talking about a shoot she did for Vanity Fair. She was saying that you could take just a really random person who was normal and humble and kind and friendly and who earned a very, very small salary and give them one day at a shoot with Vanity Fair, with a glam team and assistants and people running around after you, people literally pressing themselves against a wall so that when talent walks down, they don't have to look at you, and the clothes and the hype of everyone on the shoot telling you how amazing you are, and people saying that they'll go and hand squeeze an almond for you for your almond milk. Just all of that behavior and being treated like that, being treated like a movie star, I guess. Tina Fey said that even just one day like that could turn the most average person into a Hollywood monster. And I honestly 100% agree. You know what was really hilarious though about the Vanity Fair shoot? It was a fold out cover. So after all the fighting, Terry Hatcher still actually ended up being in the middle.
Terry, Eva, and Nicolette on the front cover. Open it up and you will see all 5 ladies.
The shoot went so badly and things were made even worse when the actual article came out and the cover photo was attached with the title, "You Don't Know What it took to get this picture." So with the article and everything coming out and the general public being made aware of this, ABC actually had to issue a statement which read, "While negotiating certain elements of a photo shoot is standard practice and was part of our coordination with Vanity Fair, this shoot simply did not go as planned." You think? Because of this, our talent were made to deal as best they could with a situation not of their making. This one isolated incident does not define these women or their relationship. As I said just a few moments ago, after the shoot, they never did a photo shoot all of the women together ever again. But even though many things were implemented to try and keep the cast happy, like minimizing their time together unless absolutely necessary, and to give them pretty much anything they wanted on top of already crazy things that they were receiving for being on such a hit show, the issues between the cast certainly continued. I will just say too, I did make a little reference earlier to Vanity Fair thinking all their Christmases had come at once when this shoot started and the issues started. As I said, Desperate Housewives was the most popular show on TV, and you know what sells magazines? Controversy and drama. The cast were under a lot of pressure, which obviously Vanity Fair knew. The Vanity Fair staff absolutely knew there were tensions between the cast, and Vanity Fair also did the interviews prior to the photo shoot where a lot of the cast members referenced things like being scared of backlash. There were also some much discussed rumors about Marsha Cross going around at this time, which we'll go over in just a second. And just being in the industry, Vanity Fair, they absolutely will have known there were some buttons to push with this cast and with actors and ensemble casts in general. And even if Vanity Fair weren't 100% sure on which buttons to push with these cast members, ABC pretty much handed Vanity Fair a list of buttons to push. ABC knew there were certain things that would cause the already boiling drama-filled pot to spill over if, for example, Terry Hatcher was in the middle of the picture. I do find it strange Vanity Fair was like, oh, they all just took up their spots and it just happened that Terry was in the middle. I've never been on a Vanity Fair cover shoot, but I can't imagine it's like when I go out with my friends and we all take a picture, and although no one wants to be on the ends, it's just kind of a free-for-all. Surely Vanity Fair taking pictures for their cover story of the most famous women on TV, talking about the biggest show on TV, why was it not very carefully planned of you're going to stand here and this light for this person and that person? I do find it hard to believe, and especially when they had been given these very clear stipulations of this is what not to do. I wanted to go over the Vanity Fair cover shoot story at the top of the video because I think that it really gives you a good idea of how big this show was, that there were these issues between the cast, and there were also a lot of media that would really take advantage of the issues, but also of the cast members in a way. Over the next few years, ABC and the Desperate Housewives production tried whatever they could to keep the set functioning. They would give the cast really whatever they wanted. They even were given like $10,000 during the first season each to decorate their trailers, which is a really crazy amount for decorating a trailer. But if they had this hugely successful show, obviously they wanted to keep all of the cast as happy as they could and all of them on board, because what happens with lots of shows, as I'm sure everybody can think of examples, is sometimes after a year or two, one of the stars leaves and then other ones start to leave. So it was kind of key that they kept the main 4-5 cast members together as long as they could. And with the issues, they obviously were trying to placate them in other ways. They, of course, also tried to keep all of the issues with the cast and the showrunner under wraps, which is what all networks and shows try to do. Despite them trying to do this, it didn't really work, as the drama and tension and issues with the cast and the showrunner was spoken about for the entire 8-year run of the show and thereafter. The issues behind the scenes were such a prevalent talking point about this show that even the Vanity Fair clusterfuck itself was parodied on Saturday Night Live. Today, though, with so much time passing, a lot of people from the show feel a lot more comfortable saying things that happened. Many of the writers have spoken out about the behind-the-scenes issues, and even one of the child actors, Madison De La Garza, who's actually Demi Lovato's half-sister. She played Juanita Solis, Eva Longoria's character's daughter. She's obviously grown up now, and she talks about the show on TikTok sometimes. And when asked about the drama, she said, "I guess it's okay to confirm now because so much time has passed, but yes, there were a lot of issues." I said this in my Charmed behind the scenes video, which was another show that was infamous for its issues behind the scenes amongst the cast. But when the child actors on set know there are issues, there's issues. Child actors are generally shielded from a lot of that stuff, hopefully anyway, even unintentionally, because they can only work a certain amount of hours, and because when they're not literally filming, they have to be getting their education. Yes, there's always a lot of waiting around and just hanging around between takes and different scenes, because that's just what happens with filming anything. But when I compare being a kid on a set and being an adult, or even being a kid and being an older teenager, there's so much less waiting around time when you're a kid, so you're not seeing as much. But obviously that's anecdotal evidence based on like my own experience, and my experience when I was a kid on sets was on movie sets. It wasn't TV shows where it's week after week, year after year, the same place and the same people. And I think it also depends a lot of the time on not only the production, but the actors too. Like my experience when I was on the very first film set I was ever on was when I was like 9, 10, and that film was with Julie Andrews and Colin Firth, people that aren't really known for their drama. All of my other experiences, time spent on sets, around and working on sets as an adult, have really not had any kids on them, or they've been there for a very minimal amount of time. I don't ever talk about kids. I don't cover them. If they aren't child actors, I try not to even mention them, apart from things like X celebrity has a child. There are child actors who have gone through horrific things, as we all know, and even child actors who, quote unquote, had good experiences seem to struggle if they were very well known, as I can't imagine what that level of fame and fortune does to someone at a young age, never mind if it all goes away before you even turn 18. Madison De La Garza is someone who has spoken about how she didn't really have tons of issues on the set as a child, but it was more people and fans and how she was commented on and and how her body was commented on, and a lot of other things that were more results and ramifications from being on the show. But that's a different topic for another day. My small amount of experience on set as a child was always great for all of the productions, but it was minimal. I am not known at all, and all of the productions were drama-free as far as child me was aware anyway. Things continued to escalate with the cast, and honestly, things have continued in the decade and a half since the show has been off the air, as several of the cast members have written character letters on behalf of one of the women of Wisteria Lane, as one of the ladies was arrested in 2019 in a highly publicized case. So we're going to break down each of the 5 leads' biggest controversies and issues, starting with Terry Hatcher, then going into Nicolette Sheridan and her lawsuit against the show and the showrunner Marc Cherry. Then we'll discuss the biggest rumor about Marsha Cross in the earlier seasons of the show, Eva Longoria's ties to Scientology, and Felicity Huffman's arrest after she took one of her character storylines from Desperate Housewives into real life. Terry Hatcher was born on December 8th, 1964 in Palo Alto, California. Her mother, Esther, was a computer programmer, and her father, Owen, was a nuclear physicist and electrical engineer. She studied acting at the American Conservatory Theater, and one of her earliest jobs was as a cheerleader for the San Francisco 49ers. She started working in television in the mid-80s through the 90s, and in 1992, she made it to the final 2 for the role of Jamie Bushman in the popular show Mad About You, but she lost the part to Helen Hunt. The next year, in 1993, Terry Hatcher's luck really changed, and she landed several parts that helped her break through into a successful actor. Her first role in 93 was on an episode of Seinfeld, and later that same year, she landed her really big first role as Lois Lane in the ABC series Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. And this role is the one she's probably most well known for after Desperate Housewives. Lois and Clark was a popular show also on ABC, and it led Terry to be able to host SNL in 1996 and be voted FHM's Sexiest Woman Alive in 1997. Also in 97, she landed her most well-known film role playing Paris Carver in James Bond's Tomorrow Never Dies, starring Pierce Brosnan. Lois and Clark also aired its final season in 1997, and after that, Terry struggled to get roles, with her appearance in Spy Kids the movie in 2001 being one of the few roles that she had in the late 90s and early 2000s. Terry Hatcher was the most mainstream well-known of the Desperate Housewives cast when the show launched in 2004, although Felicity Huffman was more known for her performances as an actor, and Marsha Cross was pretty well known too from her time on Melrose Place. The cast, crew, and the showrunner of Desperate Housewives have all referenced a bully on the set who was a big star. No one has actually named Terry Hatcher as the bully, but most people have deduced it to be Terry based on the available evidence. Some documents we will discuss involving a cast member's arrest reference the bully making cast members' lives difficult throughout the run of the show, which rules out people like Nicolette Sheridan, whose character was killed off in the 5th season, like Vanessa Williams, who joined the show as a lead in season 7, and Dana Delaney, who was a lead for seasons 4 through 6. Furthermore, Eva Longoria, Felicity Huffman, and Marsha Cross have remained close friends after the show, and they're also close with the showrunner Marc Cherry, even defending him when the lawsuit was filed by Nicolette Sheridan for Cherry's behavior on the set. I will say, however, a few cast members have defended Terry Hatcher. Catherine Jewston, who played Karen McCluskey, who basically said none of the cast were great, but of them, Terry Hatcher was the friendliest, and also James Denton, who played Susan's character's love interest on the show, Mike Delfino, said that he liked working with Terry Hatcher, and he has worked with her again, even pretty recently. So many people will ask, why don't the cast just name who the bully was? It's been so many years. Why not just say it? Because the people that aren't the bully get lumped in as some of the possibilities. There's so many reasons that they wouldn't say why, but there's a pretty big one that is it's kind of career damaging to call someone out like that because you just never know who you are going to work with on a production in the future. And what if they're really good friends with that person? Or what if they love working with that person? Or what if you're on a project with that person in the future? But it also just doesn't look good from the standpoint of when a producer or director or anyone is sitting down and being like, oh, this is the people we're considering for a role. If they see that you have gone on an interview and, said, oh, this person this person did that on set, they're not going to want someone like that on set. And it's why Hollywood, you don't really see people burning bridges or really calling people out that much. I mean, all these people have media training and they know that everything they say is going to be picked apart and scrutinized. So they're all very careful about what they say. There are, of course, exceptions, like nothing is an absolute. There's Sarah Jessica Parker and Kim Cattrall, just right, perfect example of that is kind of openly talked about. But if they name this person, there's just so many downsides in addition to it damaging your career. You also don't know, like these people could share a manager or share an agent. And it's pretty much understood that if you share an agency, for example, then you don't go and shit talk the other people that are in that agency and represented by them. But there's also just the whole you have to deal with the backlash from the fans of that person. That is something that I don't think people think about a lot. I mean, it is just one of the things that someone's always going to have fans when they're on a big show like this. So, of course, you just don't want to deal with that. These shows and movies and actors, they want everything to look perfect, and it's why they won't invite in any unnecessary drama. On the set of The L Word, a show that I used to cover on my original channel, there was 2 cast members on the set of The L Word Generation Q that disliked each other so much that one of them was given pretty much an ultimatum and had to leave the show because of the issues between them. And there's cast members on that show who didn't get on with the showrunner, and there's other too much drama that someday maybe I'll do an L Word video. I do have one on my Patreon and 1 million on my original channel, but even since I stopped covering that show, there's so much stuff that I wish I could just erase from my mind that I feel like I don't want to know anymore. And whether it's The L Word or Desperate Housewives, as I said, with the fan element, there's people that I have seen with my own eyeballs that are not great people. And if you go to any sort of forum where they're discussing a certain actor or a show, there's people saying what an amazing person they are and how kind they are from a few things they said in an interview. And you have to remember that these people know that every single thing they say and do is scrutinized and looked at and picked apart in good and bad ways. And they just are, anything they say is going to be publicized. And so when these people are knowing that anything I say, I shouldn't say anything too bad, so I shouldn't name who this bully is. But there's also the other side where they know I can drop little hints and clues where the people that really care or their fans will know what they're saying. And I talk about this in a lot of videos. I said it in my Sarah Michelle Gellar one, the last video, that people think things like, oh, this actor doesn't follow this actor. Oh, it could be just a mistake or something. But we're thinking about it as normal people. These actors know, like I said, everything is so scrutinized. Those things like following each other, they know that that's some of the only control that they have, because things like the marketing or something around a project or what they post for their new show coming out, it's all written out and, oh, this is the marketing plan, you need to do XYZ, but they know, well, they can't tell me to follow someone. So they will all have these little hints and clues, and this is what the cast has done with the Terry Hatcher thing. If you take all the things that the cast have said, like Eva Longoria, Felicity Huffman, Marsha Cross, and the creator Marc Cherry, they've all talked about this bully and the time frames and seasons and things they've done. There's no way you can deduce it's anyone else but Terry Hatcher based on what they said. For example, for a long time, people were kind of saying it could have been Nicolette Sheridan, it could have been Terry Hatcher. But Eva Longoria wrote this letter for Felicity Huffman, which we'll get into in a second. And in the letter, she was saying for the entire seasons of the show. So there's no way it could be Nicolette Sheridan because she was killed off in the 5th season. So they know that by saying things like that, it's kind of not even giving hints, but they know people will put the puzzle pieces together. And that's why most people do believe it is Terry Hatcher who was the bully and who caused a lot of issues. Not all the issues, but a lot of issues on the set because she also didn't get on with Marc Cherry. But there was also something they did during the final season of Desperate Housewives that really did make it seem like there was a very big rift between Terry and the rest of the cast. During the final season, all of the leads of the show, except for Terry Hatcher, purchase gifts for the crew, a very common thing, especially with a big successful show like this. And a lot of the time it will be something pretty nice, especially a show that was on for, many years. A lot of the time it will be something like all the crew members get an iPad and they'll like engrave it or something. And they'll obviously give them like shirts and things too, but this was explicitly a gift from the cast members. A crew member actually posted their gift and card, and Terry Hatcher's name was conspicuously absent, which is a very strange for a long-running, highly successful ensemble show. Normally, it's all of the leads doing something nice for the crew. And this was Marsha, Eva, Felicity, and Vanessa Williams, who had been a lead for the last 2 seasons. A lot of people also point to the fact that as the show went on, Terry Hatcher's character was pivoted away from the group, and even her character left Wisteria Lane in the last season, and she was given more of her own solo storylines, not interacting with the rest of the cast. Terry Hatcher and the series creator Marc Cherry allegedly also had a lot of issues over the years, but easily the biggest cast member Marc Cherry had issues with was Nicolette Sheridan. Nicolette Sheridan filed a lawsuit against Desperate Housewives and Marc Cherry. Nicolette Sheridan also did not get along with Terry Hatcher, and she actually said that Terry Hatcher was the meanest woman alive. So now we're going to discuss Nicolette and the lawsuit that she filed against the show and Marc Cherry. Nicolette Sheridan was born November 21st, 1963 in Sussex, England, and she was born when her mother was only 17. Her mother was also an actress, and when Nicolette was 10, she and her mother emigrated to the US. Nicolette had a few smaller roles on television, with her first big role being in 1986 when she was cast in Knots Landing. During the 1990s, Nicolette auditioned for roles like Rachel Green in Friends and Grace Adler in Will and Grace. So when she landed the role of Edie Britt on Desperate Housewives, she was really excited to land a lead role on one of the big networks. Jumping forward to April 2000, Nicolette's character, Edie Britt, was killed off in the 5th season during the 18th and 19th episode. The following year, in April 2010, Nicolette filed a $20 million lawsuit against Desperate Housewives, ABC, and Marc Cherry. Nicolette's lawsuit alleged that she was assaulted by Cherry on set and was then fired when she reported the alleged abuse to the network. In her lawsuit, Sheridan claimed wrongful termination, assault and battery, gender violence, discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and age, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She also alleged that Cherry was abusive to other cast members and writers. ABC responded by stating that while they were unaware of this particular complaint, they had investigated similar claims made by Sheridan and reportedly found them to be without merit. The show stars Terry Hatcher, Felicity Huffman, Marcia Cross, and Eva Longoria pledged their support to help Cherry in his battle against Sheridan's allegations and lawsuit. In May 2011, a judge granted permission for the case to continue to trial, but threw out Sheridan's claim of harassment. The case went to trial on the 27th of February 2012. Marc Cherry asserted that the alleged assault was in fact a tap to the head with his fingers done in rehearsal when he was demonstrating to Nicolette Sheridan how she should play a physical gag in a scene. He also stated that the decision to kill off her character was already approved in May 2008, which was several months before the alleged incident took place, which was September 2008. And Cherry said the reason for doing that was to reduce the show's budget. He also cited Nicolette Sheridan's unprofessional on-set behavior, such as habitual lateness, not learning her lines, and feuding with her co-stars. The fact that her character had simply run its course is one of the other reasons for his decision to remove her from the show. On the 13th of March 2012, the judge dismissed the battery charge against Cherry due to lack of evidence, and the lawsuit was then focused solely on Nicolette's alleged wrongful termination by ABC. Closing arguments were heard on the 14th of March 2012, and the jury began their deliberation. By the 19th of March, the jury had failed to reach a verdict, and a mistrial was declared. Throughout the run-up to the lawsuit, more accusations began pouring out about Cherry and his behavior on the set and in the writer's room. There's a very good video that's really detailed by a YouTuber called Mejusun, and she goes into a lot of detail about the writer's room and then also a lot of the storylines, why Desperate Housewives didn't really get its flowers compared to a show like Lost, even though the ratings were a lot higher with Desperate Housewives. And she goes into a ton of other stuff. So I will link that video down below, as I always do with all of my sources. And while I'm recommending Desperate Housewives content, I watched an excellent recap of the entire Desperate Housewives series from a YouTuber called Abby Bryn. I could not face a rewatch of certain middle seasons of the show, so Abby, thank you girl for getting me through that. Both those videos, again with all the sources, are linked down below. As I said, more was coming out about Marc Cherry and how difficult he was to work with, how he had frequent tantrums on the set, and the Daily Beast actually ended up interviewing a number of writers who had worked for Cherry, and they said that Cherry does indeed create a very difficult work environment in which he routinely clashes with actors and other writers. One of the writers said that he will dress you down in front of the staff, he will assault an idea. He is very confrontational in this way, and he has hissy fits. The former staff of Desperate Housewives that spoke to the Daily Beast said that Cherry is not physically abusive, and they can't imagine him hitting or slapping someone with the intent to hurt them, as Nicolette Sheridan was claiming in her lawsuit. But they did all unanimously say that to work for Marc Cherry, especially if you are a woman, is to be marginalized and demeaned. One of the writers also told the Daily Beast that they believe Marc Cherry hates women, and none of the people who spoke to the Daily Beast would really be specific or give examples because they had fear of being identified by Cherry or by ABC. Throughout the lawsuit, more claims were coming out about Cherry and his behavior on set and in the writer's room. After the mistrial, there was a retrial that was scheduled for September 2012, but it never happened because the case was actually dismissed in August 2012. The Los Angeles Court of Appeal determined that Nicolette Sheridan had not been wrongfully fired. The court rejected Nicolette Sheridan's argument that ABC's decision not to renew her option for another season was not comparable to a violation of an at-will employment. The court reasoned that unlike an at-will employee whose contracts would remain in force indefinitely, Sheridan's contract was set for a set term time that had expired. So ABC had not actually fired her, but they simply had chosen not to rehire her for another fixed-term contract after her contract for those 5 seasons of Desperate Housewives ended. Apart from everything that we've discussed with the issues between all of the cast, Marcia Cross did not really have any controversies outside of that and with everything with Vanity Fair. However, there were a lot of rumors and speculations surrounding Marcia Cross, especially during the first few seasons of Desperate Housewives. Marcia Cross was born March 25th, 1962 in Massachusetts, and she actually earned a scholarship to Juilliard, where she graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting in 1984. Like a lot of her fellow cast members, prior to landing her role on Desperate Housewives, Marcia got her start in soaps. As I mentioned before, her most well-known role prior to Desperate Housewives was Melrose Place. Marcia Cross's character, Bree Vanderkamp, that, as I said earlier, was based on Cherry's own mother, was probably the most talked about character on the show, and she also was a very rich character with lots of great storylines. Bree, on the surface, appears as the perfect conservative housewife with literally not a hair out of place, but as the show progresses, you see that this perfect exterior is something that Bree has developed in an attempt to cope with things she can't control. During the show, she also develops an addiction to alcohol, and I really loved watching that storyline. I think it was really well done, and there's just some great Bree scenes in the show in general, and in my opinion, she's the best character on the show. I think that is a pretty popular overall opinion, but it is just my opinion. Some people who definitely will agree that Bree is the best character, though, is my fellow lesbians, as there is a large amount of fans who ship Bree with one of the other housewives who joins the show a few seasons in, Catherine Mayfair, who is played by Dana Delaney. Dana Delaney actually was in an episode of The L Word around the same time that she was on Desperate Housewives, and she's always been pretty popular with the lesbians too. But spoilers for Desperate Housewives, she got even more popular after the last season that Dana Delaney was on Desperate Housewives, because she ended up falling for another character that was played by another queen, Julie Benz. And although Dana Delaney's character Catherine and Julie Benz's character Robin left the show together to go to Paris, there were a lot of fans who wanted Bree and Catherine to get together. I give you that context because I don't think Cherry would have written Bree in a same-sex relationship because the character was inspired by his own mother, but also because of the rumors that surrounded Marcia Cross during the first few seasons of Desperate Housewives. When Marcia Cross started on Desperate Housewives, she was 42 years old, unmarried, single, and childless. 10 years prior to Desperate Housewives, she'd actually had a longtime partner who was 25 years her senior, but he had passed away in 1993. People quickly started asking Marcia Cross about her private life, and not too far into season 1, rumors were being spread about Marcia Cross being a lesbian. The first big rumor to circulate was from Defamer blog, who titled the article Desperately Closeted, and went on to say, the rumor that Cross was intimately donning a pantsuit on the cover of The Advocate to let the world know about her preferences for female genitalia in matters of sexual gratification has spread through the media like Mexican tap water through a Tijuana tourist. Oh God, if that's not 2004, I don't know what is. Like, sexist, racist, and homophobic. Jesus Christ. Again, this is 2004, and even cast members of the L Word, I keep mentioning the L Word so much in this video, didn't want to come out in real life. Actually, when Jennifer Beals was cast on the L Word, she was told by many people not to play a lesbian, and she'd never work again if she did. Of course, things are better today. There are very popular working actresses like Sarah Paulson, who also guest starred on Desperate Housewives and is out and living her life and getting work. But there are still today a huge amount of actors and actresses that are closeted, and I mean some really big names. The rumors of Marcia Cross being a lesbian were so prevalent that she actually addressed it. Her publicist issued a statement saying, in response to recent rumors about Marcia Cross, they are completely untrue. She is, however, very supportive of the gay and lesbian community. It became such a big conversation at one point that during the first season of the show, the cast were doing this special promotion with The View, and The View's also on ABC. The View went to LA for a week, and each day it was hosted or co-hosted by a different housewife. So Terry Hatcher was Monday, Felicity Huffman was Tuesday, Marcia Cross was Wednesday. And when she was on the show, Barbara Walters said to her, "There is a rumor about you being gay." And Cross responded, "I assume this is what comes from being 42 and single. I don't know if they needed to find a reason that I'm not married, but I'm not." So the other co-host, Joy Behar, said, "So you're not a lesbian?" And Cross said, "I'm not. I did think it was really weird that there was all this curiosity about something like sexuality. And I thought, what a world we live in where that's so important." I did try and find the clips for this because I got these quotes from an article and I couldn't find it anywhere. If I do find it between me filming this and editing, I will put it in.
Then there begin to be the rumors. And there is a big rumor about you, which is that you are gay.
I'm happy.
It wasn't exactly meaning that you're happy.
I don't know if they just needed to find a reason why I wasn't married or...
So you're not a lesbian?
I'm not.
So tonight is off then between us?
Under 3.5 years later from this conversation on The View, Marcia Cross got married to a stockbroker called Tom Mahoney. She and Tom had in vitro fertilization just after they got married, and Marcia gave birth in February 2007 to twin daughters. That was a month before her 45th birthday. As I was saying at the beginning, the cast dealt with a lot because of the show, so I wanted to include one of the very prevalent rumors that circulated simply for the fact Marcia Cross had the audacity to be a single childless woman in her 40s and be a lead in a very successful television show. Next thing you're going to tell me, she had a cat too. Marcia Cross and the other women dealt with many of the usual rumors that surround celebrities, especially women, weight, plastic surgery, and a plethora of others. If anything looks ever so slightly shifted on camera, it is because my chair leg came off when I sat down and I absolutely ate it. Poor baby G is very, very nervous now because, I mean, I absolutely ate it. I flew back into that and like shoved the whole desk. It was an absolute mess, and unfortunately it was on camera. I will not be sharing it, but maybe I'll keep it for if I ever need to humiliate myself. I'll save that. But anyway, on to Eva Longoria. Eva Longoria was born on March 15th, 1975 in Corpus Christi, Texas, and she was the youngest of 4 daughters. She attended Texas A&M and earned her Bachelor in Science in Kinesiology in 1998. Eva was not very well known prior to being cast on Desperate Housewives, although she did make guest appearances on big shows like Beverly Hills 90210 and a number of soaps such as The Young and the Restless. Like Marsha Cross, Eva Longoria hasn't had a huge amount of scandals or controversies outside of the Desperate Housewives cast drama. Like Felicity Huffman is the other cast member with Terry Hatcher and Nicolette Sheridan, who had the most controversy. Felicity Huffman is the biggest by far, especially lately, and we'll get into that in just a second. But Longoria has garnered some backlash for several of her comments in recent years, and also for some of her affiliations with Scientology, and not a lot of people are actually aware of that, including her past connection to Danny Masterson. Her most recent controversy was in the 2020 election after she had spoken about Joe Biden getting elected, and she spoke about how she thinks that the Latino women were really the heroines of that election. She said that the women of color showed up in big ways. Of course, you saw in Georgia what Black women have done, but Latino women, they're the real heroines, beating men in turnout in every state and voting Biden-Harris at an average rate of close to 3-1. And that wasn't surprising to me, and that was the end of her statement. People were quick to call out the fact that she was kind of downplaying the impact that Black women had in the 2020 election, as they were not only the people who turned up to the polls, but they were also responsible for a lot of the rallying, organizing, and registering of hundreds of thousands of voters. Longoria did apologize, but her apology tried to sidestep a lot of things. As she said, "When I said that Latinas were heroines in this election, I simply meant that they turned out in greater numbers and voted more progressively than Latino men. My wording was not clear, and I deeply regret that. There is such a history in our community of anti-Blackness, and I would never want to contribute to that. So let me be very clear. Black women have been long the backbone of the Democratic Party, something we have seen play out in this election as well as previous ones." A lot of people don't really talk about this, but Eva Longoria has had some connections, past and present, with Scientology, Tom Cruise, and Danny Masterson. She did actually buy Tom Cruise's house, weirdly too, but she did recently sell it. But she has spent a lot of time socially with Cruise and supported many of his causes, and she's also praised him quite a lot in the media, even as recently as just a few months ago. If you've watched my channel before, you'll know I've spoken quite a lot about the cast of That 70s Show, and this specific story I've mentioned in 2 of the videos about the 9/11 survivors that Scientology took advantage of. I mentioned this in the video about the whole cast, and it involves the majority of the cast members of that show, but it was led by Danny Masterson. If you haven't seen any of my That 70s Show videos, I have a new second, although technically third channel that's linked down below that hopefully by the time you see this, I'll have put up a mega cut of all my That 70s Show cast videos, and it will be all together. So if you want hours and hours of background noise you need to clean, or you want something to fall asleep to, I've got you covered for that. I'm going to post new content on that channel very soon too, so consider subscribing if you want to be the first to see, but no pressure, and consider subscribing here, but again, no pressure. I don't do any sponsorships whatsoever, so that is the best way to support the channel. So in regards to this 9/11 firefighters that Scientology treated terribly, you may have actually heard about this, as this was referenced in the letters that Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson after he was convicted of multiple violent rapes. After his conviction, they wrote letters of support for Masterson, asking for sentencing leniency and speaking to his character, what an amazing person he is. And in the letters, they make reference to many things about what Masterson's done outside of acting. And one of the biggest examples that they highlighted is how after 9/11, Masterson was so motivated to help that he rallied his co-workers to help the firefighters. There were other people who were involved in this and were the faces of it, the leaders of it, And it was, as I said, other cast members from that 70s show, Tom Cruise, Michael Pena, whose wife is extremely close friends with Masterson, and also a number of Masterson's family who are all Scientologists too, like Chris Masterson, his brother from Malcolm in the Middle. Eva Longoria was one of the other celebrities that was very involved with this, and she was the only person or only celebrity outside of Masterson and his co-star Wilder Valderrama that was asked to present and speak at the event. Ash and Amila talk about this firefighter scheme being a massive help, but that is very, very far from the truth because Masterson didn't help the brave firefighters and rescue operators who ran in to help on 9/11. He actually harmed them. Tom Cruise was leading this along with Masterson, and they also brought in a number of other Scientologists along with the celebrities that I mentioned. This program, they told the firefighters when they lured them in that this was a medical program, and this was all actually investigated and covered by the New York Times. In a nutshell, they basically presented this medical program and told all of the firefighters that they needed to stop all of their prescribed medication, including inhalers, antidepressants, and blood pressure medication. They told the firefighters that they needed to stop their medication and that they were going to give them a new medication that was a single pill that actually covered everything that they were prescribed. They're still not actually sure what exactly was in this medication that they were given, but most people believe it contained niacin, which is pretty much a very large dose of vitamin B3. There were a lot of alarming issues and practices happening at this center that the firefighters went to. There was even one instance where a man was having a trouble breathing after being given a large dose of this medication and being put in a 107-degree sauna and told to exercise. The staff were discouraged from calling 911 in emergencies, so when the man started turning blue, the clinic higher up said he was just experiencing a manifestation and that they should just refer him back to L. Ron Hubbard, the guru of Scientology, his book called Clear Body, Clear Mind. Scientologists believe that taking very high doses of niacin, which is why most people think that this is what they gave the firefighters, is something that helps clear their bodies of toxins. And they also advise them to take the niacin, go into a sauna, and then exercise to try and get everything toxic out of their system faster. So this is what Eva Longoria was promoting with Masterson. Of course, people can make mistakes, find out more information, or something changes, something happens, and they realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I should apologize. But it doesn't even seem like this was looked into, because if anyone looked into this, they would straight away see there's something not right here. But Eva Longoria has never addressed this. She's never spoken about it, apologized, never tried to make it right, never done any sort of donation or anything. As I said, Eva Longoria still spends time with Cruise and still speaks out about him and what a great, kind person he is. Most recently, she spoke out about him this summer when she spent time with him at Victoria Beckham's 50th birthday party. Our final housewife, Felicity Huffman, has definitely been the most well-known and recent controversy. Huffman was involved in the college admissions scandal that went absolutely viral, and there's been a lot of content created around this case, with Netflix, amongst other streaming platforms, producing a series covering the event. Felicity Huffman was born on December 9th, 1962 in Bedford, New York, and she was born into a very wealthy family. Her father was a banker and partner at Morgan Stanley. Felicity went to a private boarding school in Vermont and then attended both NYU and the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London. She was fairly well known prior to being cast on Desperate Housewives, with a lot of her early career being spent on the stage and appearing in films like Hackers. From 1998 to 2000, she received a lot of praise and accolades for her role in Sports Night, and even scored a Best Actress Golden Globe for that role. She did also win an Emmy in 2005 for her role as Lynette Scavo on Desperate Housewives, and she did go on to win another Golden Globe while she was on Desperate Housewives, but for a different role as a trans woman in the independent drama Trans America, and she was also nominated for an Oscar for that role. That was a really big movie when it came out in 2005. She's also married to William H. Macy, who she dated on and off for 15 years prior to their marriage in 1997, so they are a very long-standing Hollywood couple, and they have 2 adult daughters together. In 2019, Felicity Huffman was arrested as part of the nationwide college admissions cheating scandal, which was also known as the Varsity Blues scandal. The Varsity Blues scandal involved 33 wealthy parents of high school students, with Huffman and Lori Loughlin, who played Aunt Becky in Full House, being the most famous faces associated with this scandal. The majority of the other parents were very wealthy, but not in the entertainment industry. Although some of the names were known because they were just really wealthy people. One of them, for example, was the heir to the Hot Pockets fortune. Federal investigators actually uncovered this scandal by accident when they were pursuing an unrelated securities fraud case. The executive that they were investigating revealed that a Yale soccer coach had offered to help his daughter gain admissions to Yale in exchange for bribes. Acting on this tip, the authorities set up a sting operation in a hotel room in Boston, and this happened in April 2018. During this meeting, one of the coaches from Yale, Rudy Meredith, was caught on tape soliciting a bribe from the executive, and he mentioned someone else involved that was called Rick Singer. The Yale coach agreed to cooperate with the authorities, and they also ended up convincing Rick Singer, who was the head of all of this, to cooperate as well. And that meant they were able to get Singer to set up incriminating recordings of phone calls and meetings with parents, coaches, and other people involved with this scheme. Between 2011 and 2018, 33 parents of college applicants paid over $25 million to Singer, who used the money to fraudulently boost entrance exam scores and bribe university officials. Over half the parents paid bribes to secure their kids' admissions to the University of Southern California. Singer ultimately pled guilty and cooperated with the FBI, admitting to facilitating college admissions fraud for over 750 families. He was given a less harsh sentence, however, because he cooperated and assisted with the investigation. In January 2023, he was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison and ordered to forfeit over $10 million. Prosecutors accused Felicity Huffman of making a $15,000 donation to the key worldwide foundation, which was Rick Singer's foundation. What Singer would do is he would have these wealthy parents pay into his foundation their bribes, and then he would present it as if his foundation was a charity and that these parents were making a charitable contribution. But Felicity Huffman didn't make a charitable contribution. Her payment was actually to have someone else get a higher score on the SAT for her daughter Sophia. The person who took the test for Sophia achieved a significantly higher result than what Sophia achieved when she took the preliminary SAT, the PSAT. Huffman was arrested at her home in California on March 12, 2019 by the FBI and IRS agents. She was charged with conspiracy to commit mail fraud and honest services fraud. The following day, on March 13th, Huffman appeared in Los Angeles federal court where her passport was confiscated and she was released on $250,000 bail. On May 13th, 2019, Huffman pleaded guilty to the charges. They didn't actually have someone go and sit and do the test as her daughter, but they had the daughter take the test, and then the proctor corrected her daughter's answers on the Scantron before turning it in to be graded. On September 13th, there's a lot of 13ths in her trial, by the way, she was sentenced to 14 days in jail, 1 year of supervised release, a $30,000 fine, which is nothing to someone like that, and 250 hours of community service. She reported to the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California on October 15th to begin serving her sentence, and she was released on October 25th, 10 days later. 2 days early, she got out due to the way the weekend was falling. I mean, if that isn't just rich people justice, but that place that she served her time, the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, is actually where Alison Mack from Smallville served her time in prison for everything with Nexium. I do have a video on Alison Mack, and I also talk about that case in my WB video, which talks about all of the controversial stuff that was going on all of the WB sets in the late 90s and early 2000s. I do want to do a part 2 to that video and want to do a CW version of it, so let me know in the comments which one first, or if you're interested in those ones. By the time Huffman completed her full sentence in October 2020, no charges had been filed against her husband, William H. Macy. In November 2023, Huffman actually spoke about the Varsity Blues scandal for the very first time, and in the interview with KABC TV, she stated that I felt like I would have been a bad mother if I didn't do it. Eva Longoria wrote a character letter on behalf of Felicity Huffman to request leniency to her sentencing, and this is the letter I was referring to in the earlier parts of the video that gives you a bit of clarity on who this bully allegedly was on set, and it eliminates a lot of people that were strong contenders for a while too. Longoria's letter read in part, "There was a time I was being bullied at work by a coworker. I dreaded the days I had to work with that person because it was pure torture, until one day Felicity told the bully enough and it all stopped. Felicity could feel that I was riddled with anxiety even though I never complained or mentioned the abuse to anyone." Her letter also detailed about the pay disparity after the success of the show, and given that Terry Hatcher was making the most during the first season, it does seem to indicate that it was Terry Hatcher fighting against equal pay for all of the cast members. Longoria said that one actor fought against everybody else receiving equal pay, and in her letter she said, "This fight lasted weeks, but Felicity held strong and convinced everyone this was the right thing to do. And thanks to Felicity, I was bumped up." As I said earlier, Marc Cherry also wrote a letter, and he said the same thing about a bully on set, and it was someone that was there for all of the seasons. And he also described this bully as a big star. So those are all the things that just most people seem to deduce that it was Terry Hatcher. But let me know what you think down below. So those are the main scandals of the Desperate Housewives cast, a show that was an absolute juggernaut during its time. I cannot describe how huge this show was. There was a time that seemingly every woman in America was watching this show, and every gay man too, as during the earlier seasons, the only thing on TV that saw more male viewership than Desperate Housewives was Monday Night Football. The show has not seen the same success over time and had that longevity like a lot of its successful counterparts, even though it was more successful. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is a soap opera, a primetime soap opera, but a soap opera. And soap operas don't really get a lot of respect, even though they're making an hour of television every single weekday, every single week of the year. And the longest running television show in the world is a soap opera and an absolute diamond of a show, Coronation Street. If you are British, you absolutely will know Coronation Street. It's impossible not to know that show. It is the furthest thing that you can possibly imagine of an American soap opera. And I just love looking at the two versions of US soaps and British soaps because they are worlds apart. But American soaps are so quintessentially American and British soaps are so quintessentially British.
Don't give me that, you lying tart.
Pack it in! I said, pack it in! Wipe that grin off your face or you'll be through that window, teeth first. Get your scrawny backside out. You bad?
As I said, it is my plan to cover the behind the scenes drama of the two other juggernauts from the golden era of ABC 2004 until, well, kind of Grace still's going, so it doesn't really end. And it is my plan to cover those very soon, as long as this video doesn't bomb. So let me know down below if you are looking forward to them, if you want to see one more than the other. And if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. Leave MVP down below so I can thank you. If you want more behind the scenes content and videos, consider subscribing, but no pressure. Just thank you so much for being here and making it to the end. I really, really appreciate it. Check out Miss G's new merch, my other channels, and also Miss G and my social media, and all of that will be linked down below along with my Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye, guys.